Hey everyone, I'm Scott Cunningham, aka Scott C Business, and today we're here with the founder of Sikoba, Alex Kampa. And if you could just introduce yourself a little bit, that'd be awesome.
It's great to be here. So yes, I've created this project. We're building an IOU platform on blockchain, and it's basically based on both my experience in blockchain and my experience in monetary theory.
Okay, awesome. And how busy is your day on an average day doing everything that you do with the company?
Well, it is quite busy because we are doing various things. So although Sikoba is the main project, we also do consulting work in the blockchain area. We also develop another software that's called Isekai. That's a zero knowledge middleware. And we have started work on an e-voting system on blockchain. All of these to complement the main Sikoba project.
Oh, okay, awesome. And for people who aren't aware of what that is, could you give a bit of a brief introduction to what Sikoba is?
Mm-hmm. So to understand what it is, you need to understand informal credit, what's generally called informal credit, although it has other denominations also. So informal credit is when, let's say, two people or two businesses do transact and one buys from the other and doesn't pay, but just say, okay, gives a promise of payment, an IOU. It's like, someone coming into a store and saying, I want to buy this. And the store owner will say, well, okay, that's $15, and how are you going to pay? And you say, well, just write it down. I'll pay you next month, right? And this is how business has been done for most of human history, and that's how business is still being done in many developing countries, but not only, of course. But in the Western and developed countries, we have forgotten this a little bit. We have our credit cards, we have banks, we tend to pay all the time. And we've forgotten that business used to be done on credit, basically. Credit means delayed payment. So that's informal credit. And of course, if I buy something, from you, and I don't pay you, I say I'll pay you later, and then maybe 2 weeks later you buy something from me, we can offset this, and as a result, we need less cash, right? Because we settle differences. So that's just to explain what informal credit is. Informal credit has shortcomings, which we are solving. We are addressing these shortcomings and we are solving them. So the first limitation of informal credit is that it's informal, right? It's maybe written down somewhere, but let's say I come to your store and buy something for $100, and we write it down, and then after 2 weeks or whatever, we meet again and say, you tell me you owe me $100, and I say, no, it's 80, right? So there's no legal certainty. We were going to register these transactions, these IOUs on blockchain, and then there is proof, there's legal certainty. So that's the first thing we do. We provide legal certainty for informal credit. The second problem we solve is that when using informal credit, you can normally only transact with people within, or companies, let's say, within your trusted circle. If you want to buy something or transact with someone you don't know, you either can't do it or you have to find an intermediary, which is generally done by making phone calls and talking to people. So it's a complex process to find someone to become the intermediary. Sikoba, we automate this. So the users will actually say whom they trust, and they can also declare that they are available, that they are ready to be intermediaries, if necessary for a fee, but the system finds these intermediaries automatically. So it gets much easier to transact beyond the immediate trusted circle. That's the second problem we solve. And then there is a third problem we solve, which is the problem of circular credit. So what is circular credit? It's when illustration where, say, you've got three, businesses, A, B, and C. A owes, $1,000 to B, B owes $1,000 to C, and C owes $1,000 to A. So you have this kind of circle. And let's say the business owners, everyone sits there and says, well, I have a debt. So A tells C, you owe me $100,000, please pay because I owe someone else. And then everyone is basically blocked, and they may not have these $1,000, right? They may only have less than that. And so they may get, it's a blocked situation. Everyone gets angry because everyone's calling up the other one and saying, you owe me, please pay. And the other is saying, I'd like to, but I'm being owed $1,000 also. And it's obvious that if you see it from above, A owes B, B owes C, C owes A, you can just clear the debt. This is called, it's clearing. So because in our system, the system will have this bird's eye view of the IOUs, clearing can occur and will unblock these situations, which cannot happen unless these people in real life, unless they actually talk to each other a lot or sit together, etc. So clearing can occur in the context of informal credit also, but it's much more difficult to organize. Here, it's automatic. So that was the slightly long answer to your question.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, like in terms of peer-to-peer lending. So what gave you the original idea to start this, and like what was the motivations behind starting Sikoba?
Well, it's I was aware of how business used to be done. Money itself is a type of debt, right? And just to be clear, Sikoba is not about P2P lending, right? We're not about lending. Lending is when you want to do a deal, you borrow money from someone in order to pay. Here, you do a deal without the money. You don't actually need the money. So the two impulses came from one, this, I would say, the knowledge how business used to be done in the past, where credit was used much more often, partly because often there was less money than today. The banking system wasn't as developed, so you didn't have this luxury of having bank credit lines and bank money available freely, and also because in developing countries today people do have less money, and so using credit, if we can help them use it better, okay, they can do much more with what little money they have. Okay, so we're coming at this from another angle. We know that there are that people in developing countries or businesses or typically small businesses don't have access to bank loans so often. So you can either go there and say, let's give them micro loans, let's give them, let's give them means of using money. We're coming from another angle, which is complementary to that, is saying, let's give them a tool by which they can actually become more independent from the money system. They can do much more without money.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I guess not peer-to-peer lending, but rather peer-to-peer IOUs is more correct. IOUs. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Exactly.
So can you explain some of the different use cases? I know you kind of touched on some of the solutions it presents, but can you share some different use cases where this might be useful for various companies and individuals to take advantage of?
So this is going to be useful especially for networks, okay? Obviously, the more small businesses, and we are targeting mostly small and micro businesses, the more business in a certain region or in a town or a city use this, the more they can transact with, just a small amount of money. Yeah. So this is what it is about: leveraging existing relationships and not being dependent on banks. So these are use cases. It's business. It's not necessarily between consumers and businesses. It's really between businesses, because businesses do understand credit. They understand just from a purely psychological point of view and this is the case in many Western countries. People don't like to be in debt. You want to have money, but being in debt is there's almost a stigma in being in debt. Whereas a businessman understands. I mean, even in the Western world, you have people or companies, whatever, who owe you money. You owe money to others. Having debts, credits and debits, it's a completely normal thing in business. You're not afraid to have debt because companies have debt. It's normal. It's a normal part of business. And if you take even a very small company, it's completely normal. And this is about IOUs. This is not a one-way thing. You're not in a system where you're trying to have as many people as possible owe you money. It's a give and take. It should be a flow and an equilibrium, and people understanding and companies understanding that it's give and take, and what you need is trust. And this trust, it already mostly exists. So we're not going to teach people something new. We're not going to tell them, here's something completely new that you're going to do. We're telling them, you're doing this anyway. But with the Sikoba app, with the software, it's going to be much more efficient and easier for you to manage your IOUs and all the debts and credits that you have. It's really the ease of use. Yeah. So you do it already with Sikoba. You'll do it. It will be much easier, much more efficient.
Yeah, that makes sense. You guys are kind of just like adding more accountability to the process and just giving them the tools to do it much more efficiently. So how can people feel confident in these peer-to-peer IOUs in a decentralized platform? Like how can they be sure that they're going to get the money back or that the credit will be eventually like paid off in some way?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's important to note that we are just a system to register these IOUs and to clear them. We do not provide any guarantees, any insurance, anything like that, right? And this is very, very clear. We tell people only transact with others, other companies, other people with whom you're already transacting. So the basic idea is every user decides to whom he or she gives a credit line. So, for example, I'd say, okay, here's some business, some artisan or whatever. I've done business with him for a long time, and usually I buy up to $200 per month. I'll give him a credit line, or he buys from me, whatever, and I'll give him a credit line for $200. Then I know that he can owe me money, but never more than a certain amount that I decide, and only users whom I have specifically selected are able to actually owe me money. Okay. Apart from that, if there is a default, there is nothing that Sikoba can do. We'd register it, and in case of default, these defaults happen in real life. I mean, they happen with or without Sikoba. What we provide in this case is the proof, some document you can actually get. Our idea is that eventually you get some kind of legal document that says, well, this IOU exists. It's been on the blockchain, it's been registered, and the user, the debtor, has actually signed off on it. And therefore there's proof, and then that can be used in court. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like, so it's not necessarily to get a bunch of people, transacting with random strangers. It's really about just providing the tools to the people who are already doing this and then just improving that process.
Exactly.
So what are some of the next big updates coming out for Sikoba?
Well, the next big thing is first quarter next year. I don't want to sort of name an exact date yet, but we want to have a pre-MVP, something that can actually be released and tested, in the field, because we're not there yet. The test app we have still has some features that are missing, so we didn't feel comfortable giving it to people for testing, but the pre-MVP first quarter next year should be ready for testing. So, which means we can then target small communities and tell them, hey, download this and start putting IOUs on it.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And where does Sikoba fit in with other similar projects? How does it differ? Or is it just do you feel that it's a completely unique project in the space currently?
It's quite unique because, first of all, there are many P2P lending platforms, projects. It's become big business. Now, P2P IOUs, we have in the blockchain space, there is trust lines that you may have heard of. But it's a different approach. We are like trust lines, but more complex, and we're for business, which means we have fees, we have all kinds of conditions that we can add. For example, when you decide that someone can owe you money, okay, you give a credit line, you decide the repayment target. Do I trust him, for 15 days, 20 days, 30 days, 60 days? You decide on the interest rate, you decide on fees. Then if you give someone access to your own network, you can also decide on a fee. Say, okay, I give you access to my network. If you didn't have that access, you couldn't transact with these other guys that I know, but you've got, you have to pay me a small fee for that, things like that. So this is really the business orientation, and the focus on developing countries is what sets us apart from the very few projects that are out there. There is this in the US. There are some apps also that are more for groups of friends who buy each other beer, and then they register that, okay, he bought me a beer, so I owe him something. But these are apps that are not done for business at all. They're more for casual registration of debts between people. We're business oriented.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because I haven't really seen many different IOU projects. I've seen peer-to-peer lending, but not really peer-to-peer IOU. So yeah, this definitely feels very unique in this space. Where do you see Sikoba going in the next year, and then ideally in the next 5 years?
Well, once we have the two big next steps beyond having a pre-MVP, having something that's actually usable, there'll be two things. The first one is to actually find partners and networks so that we can scale. And the second is actually getting the product ready, the actual product that's ready, not just in terms of features, but in terms of scaling. We want to be ready, not just for 1,000 or 10,000 users. We want to be ready for hundreds of thousands, for millions of users, because we target communities, and we want to go also basically we go to either to politicians, in let's say in like mayors or local politicians, and NGOs, and just as an example that we have a company that's doing insurance, crop insurance in developing countries. They're starting in India, and they have partnered with NGOs, and in their sort of ramp up process to as they grow the capacity. But they told me these NGOs cover an area and have actually contacts with farmers, with 1.9 million farmers. Okay, in just one region of India. So you go in some countries and you get these NGOs, and they have these networks. Okay, so we want to address entire networks. We want to go to these guys and say, you're an NGO, you're a big NGO, you probably can get us in front of thousands, tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of small businesses. Give them this app for free. Let them use it for a year. Stuff like that. So that's what we see as the growth potential. Okay, so we're not going to go door to door to small business and say, use Sikoba. No, obviously not. We want to get people who already have very, very large networks and convince them that this is something that costs very little and has a potentially big upside, and get them to convince the local guys to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. And so is your team going to be attending any events in the next year or so? Will we see you at any crypto or blockchain conferences?
That will, I would say, that will depend on funding. Also, I've been at various conferences and meetups, and I'm not sure this has been as effective and as it could have been. We're not really looking to do big things in conferences, especially blockchain conferences. I mean, what I've come to the conclusion that the blockchain crowd generally doesn't understand what we're doing. I mean, even though we're going to use blockchain, the concept of peer-to-peer IOUs is something that does not, so far, has not really resonated with the blockchain crowd. That was my experience. So I don't want to waste my time. We need to go where the users are. If we see that there is some specific conference which makes sense for us, we'll go there. But we want to be very selective. We just want to get our job done.
Yeah, I guess typically it's more of the individual users rather than it is like the small businesses and the businesses at the big networks that are showing up at these conferences.
Yep.
So before we dive into the demo, where can everyone go to learn more about Sikoba?
Well, we've got a website. It's very simple: www.sikoba.com. And
Awesome.
from the website, there are links to some videos, to our Medium channel. Mostly, I would say the Medium channel and some of the videos. There are some documents on Reddit. There is quite a bit to read if people are interested.
Awesome. Okay, well, I think now we can jump into the demo that you've got to share with us, and yeah, we can get that going. Do you want to share your screen for that, or are you going to?
Well, unfortunately, this is on a mobile app, so
okay, fair
show
enough.
it to you. Okay.
But if you want to kind of like go through and you can generally explain it. Oh
Yep.
yeah, okay, I can see that. Perfect.
Super. So once this is Alice, she's logged in, and what you can see, that's her balance. So there's a balance of I think what is it, 71.50, and you've got incoming, outgoing. So she actually has $122 incoming and 51 outgoing, and there's a list of the next payments or that either she gets or she has to make. Okay.
Yeah.
And some of these could eventually get cleared. So now just the two actions I can try and show briefly is maybe I can do it like this. She can grant a credit line. So when to grant a credit line, so she selects a user, puts in, okay, I want to put in, for example, give them 190 or doesn't matter, $190 credit line. I set a number of days for the repayment, say 45 days, and a transaction fee, which could be, let's try and 0.5%. And in this test version, there is no interest rate yet. It's in the next version that we have it already. And so these are the details of the credit line. It means now I'm giving this to Bernd. So now Bernd, another user, can pay me, which means he can buy something from me, and then he'll owe me money up to $190 limit, which he has to reimburse or actually repay in cash or in fiat money within 45 days, unless other transactions come offsetting the deal. So now I'm just saying, okay, there's a credit line created. Okay, so this is this idea that I can always decide whom I trust, whom I grant credit lines, and how much. And now, let me pay someone. So to pay someone, there is this little button here. So let's say what we'll have later, we'll have QRs, via QR codes, etc. Here, I've got to do it manually still. So I say I want to pay someone. I choose from my list. Let's say I have this one here. I choose a user, which is on my short list, like one of my usual business contacts, because maybe I'm in a store and he says, well, I have something for $50. So I say, okay, I want to pay 50. And the system gives me two options, because there are sometimes the system could tell me, okay, there is no way because you're not connected in any way. There's no intermediaries. It's not possible. Here it's possible. So it says there is one payment through another user, which is due in 20 days, and it's 50-50. So it's the fee is smaller, but I have to reimburse sooner. And the second option is 30 days, but it's a bit more expensive. I can select which one I prefer. So I prefer this one, and I say pay. And it says payment made, and the other user then sees on his app, whoops, someone made a payment, and now the IOU is on a blockchain, so transaction is done. And now I've paid, which means my balance goes down. I've got more debt. I've added a debt because I've paid something, right? So a debt has been added to the system, and that's basically it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Very simple, not a very complex process, and I think that's just what people need, especially for developing countries and different small businesses to really take advantage of that.
Yeah, and what happens? What will happen in the background is that what you've seen, these payments that are there, these and on the list, these will get cleared away if possible. So it may be that the user wakes up someday and says, "Oh, I've got less transactions," but of course, clearing doesn't change the balance. The balance stays the same, but it may be that the user needs less cash to settle something. Okay, so that's the idea. We want to do the most transactions should be done on credit. There should be IOUs. If possible, these IOUs should cancel each other out, and so that at the end, I only use a little bit of money while doing a multiple of that in business.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So I think that's about everything. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on or share before we end this off?
Yeah, we're still. I mentioned that we have actually started contacts. We have contacts with one NGO, small NGO, that's going to have a project in Haiti next year. There is a trend towards direct giving. I don't know if you've heard of that. So in the past, the focus was always to help, especially in these very poor countries like Haiti, for NGOs to go there and build something, build a hospital, whatever, do stuff. Okay, this trend is slowly shifting I think on a global scale, where NGOs have understood that actually giving people money directly is more effective than trying to help them. You just basically, whatever funds you have, you just take a community and say, hey, you get so much per month, and then you decide yourself what you want to do. This is very effective. What we want to do is to use Sikoba to leverage this. And again, this is some talks we have that I cannot yet disclose the name yet because it's very early on. But the idea would be, instead of giving people cash, they would receive cash essentially on Sikoba. And then, and it wouldn't be, these are not large amounts of cash they get, but with Sikoba, they could actually leverage that, as we discussed, the fact that they would still use IOUs as much as possible, and they would use the cash they receive monthly as a last resort. Okay, so it's combining the direct giving with IOUs to make things more effective. Yeah, and we're still looking for, apart from partners, we do look. We hope to do a fundraise sometime next year, still, because we are not very well funded. And to expand this, no doubt, to do this on a much larger scale, we will need additional funding. That's reasonably clear. So.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. And yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit to this, and I'm sure a lot of people could find this useful and should definitely check this out and should go to Sikoba and follow you guys on the various social media platforms that you've got. I assume you're probably also on Twitter and various other platforms as well.
We are, and these links are just from the website sikoba.com. Just you'll have all the links there, and there is a Telegram channel for people who are interested in this also. So yes, we're doing
Awesome.
what we can.
Awesome. And I'd just like to thank you again for coming on and sharing this project and going through the demo and everything. I really appreciate your time.
Well, Scott, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a great pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Scott. Bye-bye.
Cheers.